Alright everybody, so today was kind of an uneventful day, nothing out of the ordinary. Uber driving in Sarasota, it's just what you normally expect. So instead of telling you guys about my daily shenanigans dealing with different passengers, what I'm actually going to do today is tell you if I think it's actually worth to be an Uber driver. I mean, you're putting your own vehicle on the line, you're putting your own safety on the line. Is it actually worth being an Uber driver when you have to put your own vehicle and sometimes even your own life on the line for a few dollars? Is it worth it? That is the topic of today's video. And I guess the most basic answer would be it depends on where you live, because there are some areas that absolutely suck. The passengers can be dangerous, the roads can be unproductive, the layout of the city you live in may not work out. It could just be a horrible place to Uber. Or if you're near tourism, beaches, airports, and other things that attract people, it can actually be very profitable. So I guess it's going to depend on what city you live in. In my case, I live between Sarasota and Bradenton. Bradenton is a solid pass, but I find that Sarasota is very productive. In particular, the triangle between the airport, beaches, and downtown produces really good tips. And if I'm able to make money driving a truck that gets something like 15 miles to the gallon, then you with an economical vehicle should be able to do fine Ubering in a place like Sarasota. Now, in the few weeks I've been doing this, I've done it in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Bradenton, Sarasota, Fort Myers, and Naples. So I've gotten a very wide array of cities, and I can tell you that it definitely varies from place to place. There are some places where being an Uber driver would quite literally suck. At least in my area, I have found that the St. Petersburg area is fairly unproductive. Some parts of Fort Myers don't seem all that great. Areas like Lehigh Acres, where it's just residential properties, will probably be a horrible place to Uber. So far, the best place that I have found has been the city of Sarasota, and that is because I have a very fuel-dependent vehicle. And with a vehicle like that, getting that type of mileage, this is probably the only type of place this could ever make sense. I do feel that if you are broke or you're in a really tight spot and you need money right away, Uber will give you the opportunity to take a ride, and as soon as that person walks out of your vehicle, you can cash out on that ride. So if you are in like really bad straits where like you need money today to eat or for fuel or something, if you just need to resolve your daily necessities, then driving for Uber will give you the opportunity that is rare in the United States to get the money immediately. You're not waiting for a paycheck. If you are broke and you just need money today, this will save your life. Now, the sign-up process could take a few days or even a few weeks in some people's cases, but once you are approved to be an Uber driver and they do the background check on you, you do a ride, and the moment that person walks out of the vehicle, you can get paid. That means if it's the end of the month and you just don't have any money, or you just need to scrape $40, $30 more at the end of the day for some reason, like if you barely make enough to live and you just need money for food that day, then Uber driving will give you the ability to, with complete flexibility, be able to make some extra money 24 hours around the clock. And that right there could literally save you from starving if you are in a really bad situation where your income just isn't enough for anything. In that case, if you're a person that's always struggling to have money at hand, and sometimes you just need money to get you out of a quick fix, then Uber driving will be great for you because it gives you the opportunity to cash out immediately. The biggest variable to determine whether Uber driving is going to work for you or not is going to depend on the place where you live. If you live near a city like Sarasota that has tourism, things going on, you're going to be all right. You're always going to be able to pick up a ride. But if you live in a place that's further out, or the roads in the area where you live don't make any sense, or the places that people are going to are one direction, I think the real fatality for you as an Uber driver will be living in a place where people are going in one direction only, because then you cannot catch rides back and forth. In cities like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Sarasota, you're going to be able to go in a complete circle, always picking up new rides. But there's a few places that if you end up there, you'll never catch a ride back. In Naples, Florida, for example, if you're driving people towards the Golden Gate Estates in the evening, nobody's going into town at night, so that's a one direction type of drive, and it's very unproductive unless you're heading back home yourself. In Bradenton, I have found the area of Palmetto and Ellington to be absolutely fatal as well. These are areas where the exits are minimal, which means once you get off at the exit, you have to commute through traffic to get back out of the exit, and you're almost never going to get a ride out of those small towns. So places like Ellington or Palmetto are definitely best avoided, because once you end up there, then you have to drive back through incredible traffic. So the variables are going to be mostly related to exactly where you live. If you're in a affluent large city, chances are you're going to be doing all right. Now, I haven't done Uber driving in small towns yet, but I guess we could throw that into the mix soon and see how small towns work. But so far, I have found places like Sarasota to be perfect. You have the beaches, the downtown, and the airport nearby, which means you can endlessly drive around in a circle, always having a passenger. In the city of Bradenton, I also find that during parts of the day, it's east to west or north to south, which means that you can drive endlessly in one direction, but then you have to crawl all the way back, usually through heavy traffic, and those types of rides really don't make sense. So again, a huge component of whether it's going to be worth it or not will depend specifically on where you live and if you have good areas nearby that you can take advantage of. Thankfully, I live 20 minutes from downtown Sarasota, and this area keeps me busy. So do you take long trips or do you take short trips? This is going to vary from person to person. It depends on the day even. It depends on the direction. A lot of Uber drivers will tell you that only take the long trips. Others will tell you only take the short trips. None of that is correct. It's going to vary on specifically what you're trying to achieve for the day. And one of the most important things you can do is try to have a game plan as an Uber driver. Because if you just take drives randomly to places that once you're there, you're not going to get any rides, you can literally lose, I don't know, a great portion of your day driving back to somewhere where you can actually get a ride. Now, I'm not saying that these endless picking up ride after ride after ride and ending up 300 miles away is definitely possible in a day. For some people, that may be interesting, but I will tell you that for me, you need to make a game plan, which means that you're going to pass on a lot of rides. Now, to get some of the benefits that Uber offers, you have to take over 85% of the rides. I'm currently taking like 30% of the rides. If it's not taking me to a specific place where I can get another ride right away, I'm simply not interested in it. Now, the short ride versus long ride question, I think, has a lot of things that can vary as well, from your fuel economy to the urban scape that you're working with. For example, if you have an interstate, you can take long rides along highways. It may make a lot of sense because you're moving at 70 miles an hour, but a long ride through an urban area perhaps will make absolutely no sense. Or if the pay rate is higher, it could make more sense. These are things that are going to vary even from day to day or part of the city to part of the city. So this whole debate between long rides and short rides, you're just going to have to figure that out case by case. I have found that sometimes the long rides make the day, and I have found other times where the long rides were the biggest mistake I did. So it varies from ride to ride. And again, you just got to have a game plan. I have also found that if you just take ride to ride to ride, you can end up 120 miles from home and then not be able to get another ride back to the city you live in. So that's definitely a potential thing that can happen to you. Now, if you're okay with just exploring new places, or if you're okay driving back without a passenger from 100 miles away, perhaps that's okay with you. But I find that the short rides for me are the best, particularly short rides in very high dollar areas, because if it's a $4 ride, but I can get a $5 tip, I'm making more money on the tip than I am on the ride. Now, if you're driving around in a beat up little Mitsubishi or something, perhaps nobody's going to want to tip you that much. I have a $65,000 vehicle, and I live in a city with a lot of tourism where people want to be seen in a nice car. They want to experience being in a big pickup truck because they're driving along the beach. In those types of cases, I have found that in a day, I can make $60 in tips. Now, if I had a Toyota Camry where I was getting 41 miles to the gallon, perhaps I wouldn't go with this strategy. Perhaps if I had a Toyota Camry, I would be taking people from point A to point B, maybe more airport rides. But because I have this giant pickup truck that gets bad gas mileage, have to focus on getting high tips, which means looking for hotels, resorts, airports, and anywhere that's high dollar, even if it means taking shorter trips. But if I can please the person and get those tips, then I can make money. If you have a more fuel efficient vehicle, that strategy may not even work for you. So again, the vehicle you have, the settings that you have, and all these variables that we're talking about are going to determine whether it's worth it for you or not. I would imagine if you just drove Uber aimlessly from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, you should be able to make $200 in a day. Now, if you have a Toyota Camry, your fuel costs may only be $20, and maybe you got $20 in tips. You could, in theory, make $200 a day in a profitable area if people are tipping you and if you can get rides nonstop, 16, 20 rides a day. Going to the airport for me has been very good, but I have noticed a trend that if I'm taking people from the airport to resorts or downtown, you do really well. But if you're taking the person from the airport to a residential community that's far from an airport, those people do not like to tip. Well, then there's your safety. Being an Uber driver is not for everybody. If you live in a fairly safe area, perhaps you will not run into scary scenarios. Now, I am somewhat part of the Tampa metropolitan area, which is a large city, so there are places here where you may not want to go Uber driving, especially late at night. I can tell you that, for example, the city of Bradenton, Florida, late at night is going to be a solid pass for me. Sometimes driving late at night will pay better. In cities like Sarasota during the weekends, that's when I can get up to $60 in tips in one night. Those customers are drinking and they're having a good time. They're usually fun. They want to talk and they want to interact. But in the neighboring town of Bradenton, it's mostly people that are local going into places where they habitually go to overdrink. Those types of places can get scary. If you find that the area you are working is scary, intimidating, late at night, for some reason you feel uncomfortable, one of the best things that you can do is to engage the person before they enter your vehicle. In other words, talk to these people before they are entering your vehicle. Make sure you understand how sober they are. Perhaps you can watch them from a distance. If it's a group of people, how is their behavior? If you find that their behavior looks aggressive or if the setting makes you feel uncomfortable, it is okay to pass up on a ride if you don't feel safe. There are a lot of scams. Recently in Ohio, an Uber driver was killed. Both the person who hurt the Uber driver and the Uber driver were scammed by somebody. You're going to have some type of street smart to understand when a situation has the potential to go wrong. If something feels wrong, you need to follow your gut. If somebody makes you uncomfortable, you have to be willing on the spot to be able to tell somebody to get out of the vehicle, to tell them that you feel uncomfortable and that you don't like their behavior. Some of these people are going to use you as a mule. Some of these people are going to try to scam you. Some of these type of people are going to try to do anything they can to abuse the system, get free rides, or make you do things that are beyond what your requirements are. Or they're just simply going to be engaging in debauchery or other types of illegal activities where you're going to have to step in. It doesn't matter how intimidating those people may look, and tell them that you're not having any part of it. And if you are afraid to engage people directly, you don't have the social skills, or you're just afraid to tell somebody to get the crap out of your car, you may find yourself in a situation where you're constantly being finessed, scammed, or put in very uncomfortable situations. You are not required to put yourself in a situation that feels sketchy. If you're going to go pick up somebody and when you see the neighborhood, what they're doing, the setting, something about it feels wrong, you do not have to take that ride. That doesn't mean you have to be prejudiced. It doesn't mean that you have to have a preconceived notion about certain areas. You just have to use your brain. Sometimes I have found that people in the sketchiest neighborhoods are some of the best behaved people because they understand that when you're going to those neighborhoods, it's really not convenient for you. So they can be very well behaved passengers. And sometimes people that you're picking up out of a mansion can actually be some of the most buffoonery type people you're ever going to encounter your whole entire life. I've already picked up people in mansions, and just because you're picking people up in a place like that, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be informal, scammy, finessey, and an absolute nightmare to deal with. So sometimes those preconceived prejudices that you may have about neighborhoods or people may guide you in the wrong direction. So there's a difference between having a preconceived prejudice against people and just having street smarts to know when something doesn't feel right. And if the person, for some reason or another, feels uncomfortable, you may want to pass on it. Or you can try to have a conversation with the person before they enter the vehicle to get a better understanding of what they're doing. Hey, are you Larry? How can you be Larry if you're a female? You're a female, but you're using a guy's account. Why are you using a guy's account? You know, it's 3 a.m. Why are you in this neighborhood? Have you been drinking? How much have you been drinking? Where are you going to? You can ask people 3 or 4 questions before they get in your vehicle, and you'll be able to get an idea if this person's going to be a problem or if they're going to be compliant. To really know how profitable the area you live in is, one of the only options you actually have is just to get the Uber app as a driver, get signed up, and see what the particular area where you live in and what it has to offer. If it's really weak, I think it's like $50 to $60. That's pretty weak. If you can get up to $200 a day, you're doing great. If you can go over $200 a day, you're doing freaking incredible. Keep in mind, rush hours are the best, weekend nights, so you do have to follow the flow of people. Uber does not let the drivers be armed. Your best friend will be preventative measures like engaging people if you feel that the setting could create a problem. Also, you have to be great at de-escalation. I carry a heavy t-shirt made out of cotton in the front seat so that if somebody were to pull a knife on me, I could use that t-shirt to disarm the person and not get cut. If you're one of those people that only feels powerful when you're armed, Uber driving is not going to work for you. You are dealing with finesse, scams, and situations where your best friend to avoid the problem is actually the intuition to look forward and see if the person you're dealing with is problematic at a first glance, and to be able to follow your gut instinct. That means that if something feels wrong, you pass on the ride. And if the person's in your vehicle and you start to see bad signs of behavior, that you have the courage to engage that person and let them know that you're not going to deal with nonsense, which means you may have to tell the person, do you want to get out of the ride? Are we going to have a problem here? Is this going to be, you have to be willing to just talk to people directly. And if you don't have those social skills to engage somebody directly and sound offensive, if you're afraid of offending people, if you're afraid of how somebody may react, you don't have the ability to de-escalate situations, or if you're the type of person that is timid when feeling intimidated and afraid to just be headstrong and deal with somebody on the spot, this is definitely not the gig for you. I've only been doing this for about 3 weeks, and I can guarantee you one thing. You are definitely going to find yourself in a situation where you have to use level-headed, calm thinking, de-escalation, as well as being able to identify finesse, take control of situations, and be the most powerful and authoritarian person. After all, you are the person driving the vehicle, and Uber does let you expel that person from your vehicle. I've already been in that situation where I've had to tell somebody to get out of the vehicle, and the person refuses to get out of the vehicle, and they start making all types of threats, which can be very intimidating. Sometimes those threats have to do with maybe accusing you of doing something you didn't do. Whatever the scenario may be aware that on the phone, you have the option to record the conversation. The moment you find somebody feels intimidating or something is wrong, you're going to open that phone, you're going to press record, and you're going to tell that person, hey, we're not doing this. Do you understand that we're not doing this? Do you understand that I can kick you out of my vehicle? Do you want to get out right now, or do you want to continue? Do you want to cooperate? You have to have the ability to just take control of situations, because if you don't, you are definitely going to get tossed around like a rag. It's not so much that your safety is in peril while you're an Uber driver, but that you have to be able to rely on your own abilities to identify situations and make sure that you can remove yourself from them. And that's really what it takes. And some people have the ability to do that great. Other people really don't. But if you're an easygoing person that's timid, probably not where you want to end up, with somebody in the back seat trying to finesse you or trying to scam you. Now I'm already at the point that when somebody is, what we say in Spanish, envolviente, they're trying to involve you, they're trying to capture you. I've already been taught to identify that, and when I see somebody like that, I already know what direction they're heading. Like I had a passenger recently, there was two of them, and I could tell that they were heading in a certain direction. Couldn't quite figure out what they were trying to do, but I knew that there was a scammy aspect to their behavior. It meant answering questions indirectly, giving the people vague answers. The moment somebody starts acting scummy or scammy or finessey, you have to pull one yourself on them to even up the score and let them know that not only are they going to fail what they're doing, but you're actually the one that's going to complicate things for them. And that's a great deterrent. It's not just the fact that you have to be on the defensive. You also have to be on the offensive with some people to let them know that whatever they got going isn't going to happen. I had a ride at about 3:40 in the morning in Branson, Florida. It was a young man. He was standing out by the road, not in front of a house. I told him straight up, I said, "Hey, bro, you make me super suspicious. You're using a female's account and you're a male. You got me nervous. If you try something, I'm just going to react on the spot. So whatever you got in the back of your mind, just sit there quietly and calmly and chill, because I'm as explosive as you are. I'm letting you know right now, you're giving me a bad vibe." You can do that. And a lot of people may be intimidated to say that to somebody, but you're going to have guts to do this. So if you don't have a lot of guts, eventually you're going to find yourself in a situation where the other person is going to get the upper hand, and you don't have to give them the upper hand. So if you're thinking about being an Uber driver, yes, there are definitely some serious concerns. Most of the time, it's not going to be direct threat of violence. It's going to be finesse. It's going to be scam. It's going to come down to your ability to go head on, headstrong, and address informalities before they get any worse. Me, what I find works best with my personality is the second that I detect something, I bring it to their attention right off the bat. Like today I had a guy in the car and I felt like he was doing something where I said, "Hey man, you're not doing this weird little thing here, are you? Okay, I just want to be sure. Okay, I want to make sure that's not what you're doing, right? Because I'm not going to put up with it." Eventually, I think the real deal breaker for a lot of Uber drivers is simply the safety aspect. The fact that you have to constantly have different people come into your vehicle, and different people have different schemes. They're not all the same. You have to discover different schemes. You have to discover different plots. You have to discover different dangers of every single person that steps in. And that can be overwhelming, because there are times like today, you're going to be dropping people off in places that are outright sketchy. I had a person recently where I dropped them off in front of a memorial where somebody had been killed. That means that right where I was going to park was right next to, well, where somebody was murdered, and there was a vehicle there. You can see that something violent had taken place right where I was dropping this person off. If you think you know how sketchy your city is, you have no idea. I thought I knew how sketchy Branson and Sarasota are. After all, I've been driving through here for about a year. Let me tell you, I have discovered more sketchy places in Branson and Sarasota in the last few weeks Uber driving than I had in the whole previous year. So you're going to find places where you pull up to an apartment complex like this, there's 40, 50 people hanging around. Some of them are going to have weapons out. Some of the places you're going to go into, they're going to have memorials for people who've been killed in those neighborhoods. You're going to go into neighborhoods where a car's going to get behind you, and they're going to follow you as you enter and leave that neighborhood, because they're neighborhoods that have disputes with other neighborhoods, and you can't just go into these neighborhoods without somebody watching you. So all that is part of the package of being an Uber driver in a large metropolitan area. You are going to have to go into places that you're going to feel extraordinarily uncomfortable going into. It's part of the package. Then there's the indefinite complications of being on the road. You're going to be driving 200 to 100 miles a day. You're eventually going to run into potential car accidents. You're going to eventually run into debris on the road. Somebody's going to ding up your car. Like, the more you put your car out there, the more things can happen, and the overhead could actually become ridiculous if you have an undesirable consequence like a car accident, or just you're out there more. You're putting yourself out there more. Your vehicle's going to get more wear and tear, so you have to also consider the long-term overhead. I think this is more of something you do temporarily, like if you lose your job out of the blue and you just need to make some money for a brief period of time. I don't think the long-term vision of being an Uber driver is a great one, simply because of all of the undetermined variables. Eventually, you could run out of luck and run into a real dangerous situation. You could eventually have a car accident. You could have people throw up in your car. I mean, it's a never-ending list of potential what-ifs that could happen. And if you do it long enough, you're going to eventually run into one of those. Now, there are people who do this permanently. I personally actually like the experience. I like dealing with the people. I like getting out of the house. I strap my GoPro on the hood of the car and I hope to find something crazy one day on the road. All that comes with the package. But even when I used to do my YouTube travels, when I used to drive long distances, there will be repercussions eventually. It's just mathematically, the more you're out there, the more things are going to happen to you, your person, your safety, your vehicle. Something will eventually happen, which means that in the long term, it may not be the best option. But if you are in a little pinch, it definitely seems like one of the best hustles out there right now. Finally, vehicle depreciation. If you were to drive 200 miles a day, 365 days a year, you just did this thing non-stop like an absolute animal, you're going to rack up 73,000 miles a year. But those 73,000 miles will equal about $65,000, depending on the mileage you get. Now, sometimes it's more than $1 per mile, like if you're getting a lot of tips. If you're taking long trips, it's less than that. But let's just take it as it is. You, in 1 year, drive 73,000 miles, and you get $73,000. When you take away your fuel and all your other expenses, you could probably easily pay off a $50,000 car in a year Uber driving. Now, that car will now have 73,000 miles, so you're going to pick a vehicle that with 73,000 miles would still have a lot of value. We're talking vehicles like pickup trucks, SUVs, vehicles that definitely hold their value. Definitely doesn't work the same math with a Toyota Camry. Now, for Toyota Camry, you're not taking so much of a hit on the depreciation as you are on the profit, larger profit margins. In theory, you could quite literally pay off a brand new Toyota Camry in 6 to 7 months if you just Ubered like an absolute animal. With numbers like that, I don't think that vehicle depreciation is really a considerable factor, because if you're driving a newer vehicle that has a warranty, there's also one factor that people do not include, and that factor is that you need a vehicle yourself. You already have one, you're just getting more use out of it to make some money. And that is a factor that many people do not throw into the calculation of how much depreciation goes into driving a vehicle for Uber. People who don't have a vehicle and use Uber to commute back and forth are spending between $600 to $800 a month. So you're going to have to take that number out of the equation because you have a vehicle in the process. And I know that seems kind of retarded for somebody to overlook, but a lot of people, when they think about vehicle depreciation, even if you don't drive for Uber, you're still going to have to change your tires. You're still going to have to make vehicle repairs unless you have a warranty. Wear and tear is still going to happen, and ownership cost of a vehicle still exists. You're just putting more of that money on your side of the equation at the cost of depreciation, which you can still write off mileage. Thus, it doesn't really seem to me that vehicle depreciation is the top of your concerns. Either way, if you have a job, you still have to commute back and forth to your job. Many people commute an hour each way, which is a fraction of what an Uber driver does in a day either way. So even that doesn't check out as well. So the added wear and tear and upkeep cost of your vehicle, because now you're driving it more, that is not a significant barrier that should prevent you from using Uber. At the end of the day, if you get a job, you still need a vehicle and you still have to commute, so that overhead cost still exists. And if you're doing it with a new vehicle, then it's under warranty, so repairs wouldn't really matter. Yes, you're going to have more oil changes. Yes, you're going to have more tire rotations and tire changes. But overall, a new vehicle shouldn't have repairs because you're using it more. If you're somebody who drives 50 to 100,000 miles a year every single year like I have, then you understand that having a vehicle costs money either way. you might as well get the full benefit of owning the vehicle. And a lot of people buy a vehicle and they think that that vehicle is going to last them forever, and they actually do hold on to vehicles forever. But if you are in the business of putting miles on a vehicle like I am with my YouTube channel or with the Uber or many of the other businesses that I've had in the past, you actually know that sometimes you can actually buy a vehicle for $10,000 or $20,000, put 100,000 miles on it, and then still sell it for exactly what you bought, because used vehicles raised in value. Perhaps not a Toyota Camry, but if you got a big pickup truck like a 2500, I've actually purchased a vehicle, put 50, 60, 70,000 miles on it, and then sold it for more than what I bought it for, or about the same, while writing off the mileage. It really doesn't work out the way people think. So yes, you do put more mileage on your vehicle, but at the end of the day, if you have a car note, you have to pay it off somehow. You might as well make it quicker. Take my ridiculously high car note. It is $1,200 a month. I can make $1,200 maybe in 5 or 6 days if I went nonstop on the Uber, and then I still have that vehicle for the remaining 3 weeks. And by the time I put 100,000 miles on the truck to pay off the truck will still be worth $30,000 or $40,000 with that mileage. So it's not all loss either way. That math is different on a smaller vehicle. Perfect example, I bought a GMC 2500, a 2004, for $8,700. It had something like 112,000 miles when I bought it. I sold it with 245,000 miles, and I got 50 some $100. I can't remember. Let's say 5,000 or something. That means that I only lost $3,000, but I got 130,000 miles roughly or something out of that equation. That's an absolute definite was worth putting those miles on that vehicle, because in that 130,000 miles, I could have made, I don't know, $300,000 or something. I'm not even sure. I'm just letting you know that yes, the math does make sense. You have to own a vehicle either way. So remember, it's not just you're using that vehicle solely for Ubering. No, you're also using the vehicle. And if you didn't have a vehicle, then you would be the one spending $700 a month Ubering. What's the point? At the end of the day, that's the math. It does make sense, but this may not be for everybody, and it may not be forever. It definitely seems like a thing that if you did it infinitely, eventually you would have some very horrible things happen to you. I do know somebody who's been Ubering for years now, and they actually upgraded to a bigger and more expensive vehicle for the same reasons that I've explained to you, that it actually makes more sense to have a vehicle that's bigger, like an XL vehicle, where you can get more money, more rides. You're more comfortable as a driver. Let's not forget that aspect of it, okay? If you're going to be driving 200 miles a day, you might as well do it in something where you're comfortable, sitting nice and high, and that you're safe. These small little vehicles are not safe, so consider all that as well. But in my experience, I have seen people who've been Ubering for years actually end up Ubering out of a very expensive vehicle because they know the math makes sense.